The day I discovered Brian's anonymous post online, accusing me of fraud, I realized my best friend had been weaving a web of lies to destroy me. My name is Kevin, and I'd trusted Brian since we were kids in a dusty Chicago suburb, sharing dreams over cheap sodas. His betrayal hit like a freight train, and as I sat in my dim apartment, staring at the screen, I swore I'd expose him, no matter the cost. Brian and I had built a small online business together, a platform for local artisans to sell their work. I handled the tech, he managed the charm, sweet-talking vendors and investors. We were a team, or so I thought. The post, buried in a community forum, claimed I'd been skimming profits, faking sales numbers, and lying to our partners. It was detailed, convincing, and signed with a pseudonym, Truth Seeker. But I recognized Brian's phrasing, his knack for twisting words. The post had already spread, tanking our business's reputation and costing us contracts. My inbox was flooded with angry messages from vendors like Sarah, who trusted us with her livelihood. I confronted Brian at his loft downtown, a sleek space funded by our success. He leaned back in his chair, all smiles, denying everything. "Kevin, you're paranoid," he said, his eyes darting to his phone. "Why would I sabotage us?" But I saw the flicker of guilt, the way his fingers twitched. I showed him a screenshot of the post, watching his face pale. He tried to laugh it off, claiming it was a competitor's smear, but I wasn't buying it. "Fix this, Brian," I said, my voice low. "Or I'll find out why you did it." I spent the night digging through our platform's data, tracing IP addresses and user logs. The post came from a coffee shop Brian frequented. It wasn't proof, but it was a start. I reached out to Sarah, who'd lost a major deal because of the rumors. Her voice cracked as she told me how she trusted Brian's promises. "He said we'd go big, Kevin. Now I'm broke." I vowed to make it right, not just for her but for everyone he'd hurt. As I built my case, I noticed odd patterns in our financials, small transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Brian had access to our books, and I began to suspect he was hiding more than a smear campaign. I was about to call him when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Drop it, Kevin. Some truths aren't worth chasing." The message, "Drop it, Kevin," burned into my mind. It wasn't Brian's number, but it carried his cowardice, hiding behind anonymity. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop where the post originated, watching patrons through the rain-streaked window. Chicago's lights blurred, but my focus was sharp. Brian's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was calculated, and I needed to know why. I'd spent the day diving deeper into our platform's back end. The financial discrepancies I'd found were no accident, thousands of dollars funneled to a shell account labeled Horizon Creative. Brian had always handled vendor payments, claiming it was his strength. Now I wondered what else he'd hidden. I reached out to Travis, our part-time bookkeeper, who worked from a cramped apartment in Wicker Park. When I knocked, he looked nervous, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Kevin. What's going on?" "I need to see the real books," I said, stepping inside. His place was a mess of receipts and laptops. I showed him the transfers to Horizon Creative. Travis fidgeted, avoiding my eyes. "Brian said it was for marketing," he mumbled. But when I pressed, he admitted Brian had instructed him to keep the account off our main records. "He said it was temporary, Kevin." I didn't ask questions. "You should've," I said, my anger barely contained. Travis gave me access to the hidden ledgers, revealing dozens of transfers, money from vendors like Sarah, siphoned off for Brian's personal gain. It was enough to ruin him, but I needed more to expose him publicly. I contacted Emily, a graphic designer who'd joined our platform early. She'd been vocal about the fraud post, blaming me. Over coffee, she softened, admitting Brian had promised her exclusive deals that never materialized. "I trusted him," she said, her voice heavy. "We all did. I promised her the truth." But as I drove home, I noticed a gray sedan following me, keeping its distance. It tailed me for blocks, then vanished when I turned into my complex. My heart raced, someone was watching. That night, I found an email from an anonymous account. "You're digging in the wrong places, Kevin. Back off, or your sister pays." My sister, Lauren, lived across town. She was a teacher, uninvolved in my business. The threat felt like a blade to my chest. I called her, but it went to voicemail. Panic set in. Whoever was behind this knew exactly how to hurt me. The email's threat, "Back off, or your sister pays," loomed over me like a storm cloud. I didn't go to the police. Brian's connections ran deep, and I wasn't sure who to trust. Instead, I kept digging, using my burner phone to contact more vendors. Each story was a punch: a jeweler, a potter, a weaver, all burned by Brian's lies. I was building a case, but I needed undeniable proof to take him down. I tracked down Clara, our platform's social media manager, at a diner near her office. She looked drained, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "I know Brian's behind the fraud post," I said, sitting across from her. "And I think you know more than you're saying." Clara's hands tightened around her mug. "You're playing a dangerous game, Kevin. Brian's not alone. He's got someone backing him, someone with influence." She leaned closer, whispering, "There's a digital ledger, separate from the public books. It tracks every cent he's moved. If you want to nail him, find it." "Where is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe his personal server, maybe encrypted. But if you go after it, you're stepping into a minefield." Her words haunted me. Brian's apartment was a fortress of tech, multiple monitors, private servers, the works. Accessing it would be risky, but I had no choice. I parked near his building at dusk, watching for movement. The lights were off, but I saw a shadow pass his window. Not Brian, someone else. I waited until early morning, then slipped into his building service entrance, using a code I'd seen him enter once. His apartment was a shrine to his ego: high-end gadgets, framed awards from our business. I searched his desk, finding nothing but locked drives. Then, behind a monitor, I found a hidden USB stick, labeled HC. Horizon Creative. I pocketed it and was about to leave when I heard a key in the lock. I ducked behind a couch, heart pounding. A man entered, his voice low on a phone call. "He's getting close. We need to shut this down." His face was scarred, unfamiliar, and terrifying. Brian wasn't just a traitor, he was tangled with dangerous people. The USB stick felt heavy in my pocket as I slipped out of Brian's apartment, the scarred man's voice echoing, "We need to shut this down." I drove to a library across town, my hands unsteady as I plugged the stick into a public computer. It was encrypted, as expected. I tried passwords, Brian's birthday, our business name, even Horizon Creative. Nothing worked. But I wasn't giving up. I called Travis, who sounded like he'd been up all night. "Know a guy who can crack encryption?" I asked. He hesitated, then gave me Ethan's name, a hacker who worked out of a tech shop in Pilsen. I met Ethan in a cluttered backroom, surrounded by blinking servers. He took the USB, his eyes narrowing. "This is heavy stuff, man," he said. "You sure you want to open this can of worms?" "I have to," I said. He promised to crack it by morning, but warned me, "Brian's got powerful friends. Be careful." I spent the day laying low, avoiding my apartment. I pored over Travis's ledgers again, tracing the Horizon Creative account to a bank in the Caymans. The pattern was clear: Brian was funneling vendor money to himself, but the amounts were too large for one person. Someone else was involved, someone bigger. I contacted Sarah again, who shared more stories from vendors. Their trust in Brian had cost them everything, and I was determined to expose him. That night, Ethan emailed me a decrypted file. In the library's quiet corner, I opened it. The ledger was damning: hundreds of names, thousands of dollars, all siphoned off. A column labeled, closed, marked vendors who'd questioned Brian, including Sarah. My stomach twisted. Closed meant silenced, their complaints buried under Brian's lies. Before I could plan my next move, my phone buzzed with another anonymous message: "You're too close, Kevin. Think about Lauren's job." Lauren taught at a public school, her career her lifeline. The threat was clear, they'd ruin her if I kept pushing. I called her again, but still no answer. I had to find her before they made good on their threat. The threat against Lauren's job sent me spiraling. I raced to her apartment, the Chicago skyline a blur. Lauren was my only family, a teacher who'd stayed out of my business dramas. If Brian's allies targeted her, it was my fault. Her apartment was empty, but I found a note on her fridge: "Stay out of it, Kevin." My heart sank. They'd been here. I called Ethan, my voice shaking. "They're threatening my sister. I need everything on that USB, now." He sent the full decrypted ledger. It was worse than I'd thought. Brian was laundering money through our platform for a network led by Victor Holt, a wealthy consultant with City Hall ties. Sarah's name was marked, closed, because she'd asked about her missing payments. I realized Brian had orchestrated her silence, and others, to protect his scheme. I reached out to Clara, desperate for guidance. She sounded terrified over the phone. "Victor's the real power, Kevin. Brian's just his front. If they're after Lauren, you need to back off." But I couldn't. Victor's office was downtown, a glass tower of influence. I had no plan, just the ledger and a burning need for justice. I slipped into his building's lobby, posing as a courier. The elevator took me to Victor's floor, where he sat behind a desk, exuding calm control. "Kevin," he said, his eyes cold. "You're persistent. Where's Lauren?" I demanded, gripping my phone with the ledger files. "She's fine," he said. "For now. Hand over the data, and we'll talk." I showed the phone, but kept my distance. "Let me see her first." Victor smiled, but before he could answer, the door opened. Brian stepped in, his face a mask of regret. "You should have let it go, Kevin," he said. "Now you've forced my hand." Brian's words, "You've forced my hand," cut deeper than any lie. I glared at him, but Victor raised a hand, silencing us. "You're a problem, Kevin," he said, his voice smooth. "But I'm reasonable. Give me the files, and this ends." His men loomed behind me, their presence a quiet threat. I clutched my phone, the ledger my only weapon. They escorted me to a private meeting room in Victor's office, where Lauren sat at a table, pale but unharmed. "Kevin," she said, her voice trembling. Relief flooded me, but I knew we weren't safe. Victor held the USB stick, turning it over in his hands. "You've caused a stir," he said. "But I'll make you an offer. Delete the files, and Lauren keeps her job." I looked at Lauren, her eyes pleading for peace. But I knew Victor's promises were empty. I pretended to comply, handing my phone to Brian. "You do it," I said. "Show me you're not theirs." Brian's hands shook as he held the phone. For a moment, I thought he'd turn on Victor. But he shook his head. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm too deep in." He started deleting the files, his eyes avoiding mine. Anger surged, but I kept my voice steady. "You're choosing them over us," I said. Victor's men stepped closer, but Lauren spoke up, her voice firm. "Kevin, don't give up." Her courage gave me strength. I noticed Brian's hesitation, his fingers pausing over the screen. He was the weak link. As Victor droned on about consequences, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a backup device. A message from Ethan, files backed up. Ready to send. I'd planned for this. But before I could act, another message came through, anonymous. "Bring the ledger to the docks at midnight, Kevin." Or Lauren's career is over, and so is Evelyn's. The message about Evelyn hit like a thunderbolt. She was alive, hidden away after Brian's lies drove her from town. The anonymous text demanded the ledger at a dockside warehouse by midnight, threatening Lauren's job and Evelyn's safety. I told Lauren to stay safe, but she refused. "We're in this together," she said. I nodded, knowing we had only the truth to fight with. The warehouse stood dark against the Chicago night, its walls lit by flickering streetlights. My backup phone held the ledger, ready to send to a journalist friend if things went south. Inside, the air smelled of rust and brine. Victor waited at the far end, flanked by his men, including the scarred one, Derek. Brian stood to the side, his eyes downcast. In the center was Evelyn, looking frail but defiant. "Kevin," she whispered, her voice breaking my heart. "The files," Victor said, his tone flat. I held up my phone, finger on the send button. I'd prepped an email to expose Victor's network. "Let her go first," I said. Victor nodded, and Derek stepped back, letting Evelyn walk to me. I caught her as she stumbled, her hands trembling. Lauren guided her toward the exit. But Victor wasn't done. "The phone," he demanded. I tossed it to Brian. "You choose," I said. "Us or them?" Brian hesitated, his eyes flickering with the boy I once knew. But he deleted the email, muttering, "I have no choice, Kevin." I stared at him, then said, "You always did." Unbeknownst to him, I'd sent the files from my backup phone. The journalist received them instantly. Police arrived minutes later, tipped off by my friend. Victor and his men were detained, their scheme unraveling as the ledger went public. Brian tried to explain, but I turned away. Evelyn and Lauren rebuilt their lives, while I left Chicago, haunted by the cost of my revenge. Brian lost everything, but exposing him didn't heal the betrayal, it only left me empty, my trust and friendship a debt I'd never repay.